Greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the Storyteller's Corner. I'm your host, Joshua T Calkins-Treworgy, also known as Barnum Sidious. Recent book read for me was initially just going to be something to read for entertainment purposes. It was recommended to me by a colleague of mine at work who is, like myself, a big sci-fi fan. He's much more vested in the series that this book is from. It's Star Trek, the Kobayashi Maru, couched in the timeline or time frame of the original series. And I found a copy on Thrift Books for only $6. Went ahead and ordered it. And I was just going to read it for entertainment purposes, just to finally have something to read for leisure purposes. This was not for analysis. This was not for in-depth review. And this is not going to be one of my more in-depth reviews. But I was pleasantly surprised. I was not expecting, highfalutin narrative or prose. And as much as I enjoyed it, I would not say it's highfalutin or exceedingly in-depth. However, it was a very enjoyable read through and through, and it was quality writing. In large part because the story didn't rely on a great deal of technical jargon. It didn't rely on an exceedingly deep understanding of the characters, the series, or lore, even though I have a basic level of understanding of the original series of Star Trek. I'm not as in-depth into the weeds on the lore as my father-in-law or my wife, who are both big fans of the original series. I'm much more of a next-gen guy, and I've finally gotten myself around to starting to watch through the series Deep Space Nine. But it's couched more in character examination. The story is couched in the framework of Kirk, Sulu, Bones, Scotty, and Chekhov being on a shuttle that was sent out to investigate an anomaly in a nearby or en route to another mission that the Enterprise had embarked upon. But they noticed a phenomenon in a nearby star system and went to investigate, and something happened, and their shuttle was disabled. And while they're drifting through space, hoping to try and effectively pray that Spock and the Enterprise will come find them and pick them back up. They can't communicate to the Enterprise. Their communication systems are knocked out. Even that, there's not a deep dive into all the technical jargon that one might expect from a sci-fi series. They just kind of go, Julia Ecklar, the author of this particular Star Trek novel, doesn't get you into the weeds on the tech and the engineering, which I can appreciate. I'm not exactly the most expert in the technology of Star Trek or any sci-fi series of this nature. But, so that's kind of the framework during which the injured members of the Enterprise were on this shuttle. Each go through and talk about their experience with the Kobayashi Maru test scenario that they undertook at Starfleet Command School. Except for Bones, because he didn't go to command school. He's a medical officer. Each of their flashback scenarios don't necessarily focus entirely or specifically on their response to this hypothetical simulated scenario. Though I will say, in terms of technology, the fact that they had like a duplicate bridge at the academy that simulated all of the experience of the testing environment, it gives a clear delineation between the massive differences in training protocols between the original series Starfleet and what was possible during the Next Generation series of Starfleet officers who had access to the technology of the holodeck. Now, there was, to be fair, a holodeck technology in the timeline of the original series, but it was more of a recreation room, and they covered this in the animated series in the 70s that was predicated on the original series, but it was more kind of holograms placed within the setting of a rec room. It wasn't full interactive holograms that you could actually have tactile sensation with. That's all besides the point. At the end of the day, each of the characters who tell their story of their time at command school, from Kirk, who was the first one to talk about how he cheated the Kobayashi Maru test, to Sulu, to Chekhov, to Scotty, each of them exposes elements that really help build the lore behind their characters, both in terms of their practical application of skills and abilities to their personality traits and character makeup, which is exemplified in the show and the series of films. And you get a deeper look into each of these characters beyond what was available in those episodes of television and the films. Ultimately, it does serve excellently as a character building piece. And it was well written and entertaining for its short run. It's not exactly the longest work, approximately 250 pages in pocket-sized paperback. But I would recommend it if you can find a copy on Thrift Books, eBay, or Amazon. If you can find a copy of it for cheap, I'd say go ahead and pick it up because it's worth the read, especially if you're a fan of Star Trek, regardless of which generation series you found as your primary or your landing point. I'm not going to give it a score rating because I didn't do this as a reading for in-depth analysis or review, but just going to generally say definitely worth a read and a recommendation if you can find it on the cheap, and if you don't have kids who will unfortunately tear the cover. That's all for now, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I ask you to take care of yourselves, and as always, keep reading.